To work on a pen and ink, we're going to do this one on just Bristol board. You can get this at any art supply store. It's called Strathmore Bristol. And this sheet is 11 by 14. It comes in a pad and it's 100-pound weight. But it's just a nice white, heavyweight paper, kind of like a cardstock. And it just has a very slight texture to the surface, but it's nice for pen and ink. And to transfer our design, I like to use, when I'm doing pen and ink, you want a graphite paper that doesn't have any waxes in it because you don't want anything to resist your inks. So I always like to use I'm going to close this so I don't get my paper dirty, homemade graphite paper. And this is very simple to make. It's a little tedious, but it's easy and inexpensive. All you do is take a piece of tracing paper and a pencil, and you're going to, sharpen your pencil. This one's not real sharp, but it'll work for our purposes. And you're going to lay the pencil on the side, and you're just going to start covering that tracing paper with a fine layer of graphite pencil. So just continue that, whatever size sheet of graphite paper you want. And when you've got that done, just take a piece of paper towel and just lightly wipe over the surface to remove any excess. And you can just use this graphite paper for a long time and just refresh it every once in a while with some fresh pencil scribblings over it. So I've got a piece here that I've been using for years, and sometimes hard to tell which side is the graphite side, but usually it's the side without the graphite will be just a little bit whiter. So you're going to lay your design, and here we're going to do this little cardinal. And just to show you where I started from, this was a photograph taken in my backyard of a cardinal sitting on top of a little weeping cherry tree. So I printed that out on just my laser printer, and then I took a piece of clear acetate and laid that over the photograph, and then I used a permanent pen to just do my tracing. I scanned that tracing into the computer and cleaned it up into a photo editing program. I use Photoshop, and here's my final drawing, and I printed that out onto a piece of parchment or vellum paper. It's real easy if you have an inkjet printer or a laser printer, just to print your drawings out onto vellum, and then that saves you the step of tracing. So here we've got our tracing, and let's see, this will probably end up being about an 8 by 10. As I said, this paper was 11 by 14. You could do it that way if you want it, and just do a little larger mat around it. But I think I'm going to turn it this way so I have, some space at the top and bottom. And we'll figure like probably an 8 by 10 mat that would fit an 11, maybe an 11 by 14 frame would be good for this. So we're going to position our vellum with the tracing on top of the Bristol paper. And you can take a little piece of tape if you want to hold that in place. And then we're going to slide our homemade graphite paper in between. And when you're working on pen and ink, you really want to try to avoid as much as possible pressing down on your tracing. You don't want to get your paper too dirty from the graphite paper rubbing off on it. And And then we'll take just a fine stylus. This is a double-ended stylus and the one end's very fine. And I'm just going to go over some of the main outlines. I don't want to transfer all this little detail that we're going to do with a pen. I just want the outlines of the bird and some of the outlines of the leaves, and then we'll go back and start filling that in with a pen. So try, you know, if you need to put your hand down, try to do it inside the design. Don't do it out here on the edges where you could get dirty smudges. I'm going to put my baby finger down here in the middle of the bird, so if I get any graphite lines smudging on the paper, it's going to be covered with ink and some paint. And then I'm just going to lightly transfer the basic outlines of this design onto my paper. And just when you first get started, check just to make sure that your tracing is transferring, and you just want enough of the line that you can see where you're going to be doing your inking. You don't want it to be too heavy. So that looks really good. So I'm just going to continue going around and tracing these main outlines of my design. And as I said, just trace the basic necessities. Anything that you can freehand, just leave it off your original tracing. So we've got our design all traced down using our homemade graphite paper, and we're going to start by inking the design. And I've got a selection here of different black markers. Some of these are the Copic markers, and some are these I got from Royal Langnickel. They're called nanoliners, but it's just a variety of sizes from like a 0.05 up to a 0.1. So the like a 0.05 I think is the finest, and the larger the number, the little nub gets thicker. So I would probably just have maybe 2 or 3 at your disposal. And I'm going to start out with the 0.05. I'll lay these rest up here. And we might be able to just get by with just one. But you want to kind of look at your colored image, and we're first going to just do the basic outlines. I'm looking for my colored photo here. Here it is. So, you know, I just want to, my photo really isn't a very clear photograph. It's not as sharp as I would have liked it. So I'm going to have to kind of just make do. But I'm just kind of looking along this edge, and I want to go along and just trace in some of these edges. I'm going over my pencil lines, and if I don't go right on them later, I can go back and erase it with a soft white eraser. They don't have to be exact, but we want to, you know, get everything outlined and start adding some shading and texture. But first, we're just going to do the outlines. So here's a little line around the black portion of the face. So I'm going to come along here and just work that. We come up here over the eye and back out over the forehead. And the bird's eye sits right in this little triangular space of that black. So I'm going to come along and outline that, and then outline the eyeball. You don't want these to be just solid lines. I'm just kind of hitting and missing and just letting it have a little bit of a texture. So this is sort of a broken line here. So it doesn't look so much just like outlining. So let's do a few leaves, and let's see, here's we'll put in some veins here. And a lot of these leaves are sort of folded. So for instance, this one here, you're seeing the back of the bottom of the leaf here on this side. And then you'll see on this side, you're just seeing a little bit of the reverse side. So it's like the leaf is folded up together. So you'll notice on some of these leaves, they've got kind of a little like scissory edge, so I'm just making them a little jagged as I go along, just to give them some additional texture. And then some on these little branches, I'm going to do some little cross lines to give, again, a little bit of texture and dimension, just following the contour. And you can do some on your bigger branches, just some little dots and broken lines, just to give the the branch sort of a rounded look. If you curve those, it makes the branch look like it's curved. And we'll add to that effect a little later when we start putting in some color and do a little bit of shading. But mostly with this first pass, we're just trying to get the basic shapes established in here. And I've taken some liberties with my line drawing. For instance, like here along this big trunk, I didn't like the fact that it was so unbroken. So I've created some little leaves that kind of come back and come over the edge of that, so it's not such a solid, even line. And it's something that just was a little more pleasing to look at. So when you're working from a photograph, don't feel like you have to recreate it exactly like what the photograph is. If there's something that bothers you or you think would be prettier if you did it a different way, don't hesitate to do that. So now we've got all of our basic inking done. We've got all the outlines, all the leaves are worked in. And you can go back at this point and start adding a little more inking to create some shading and detail. And there's different ways you can do that. For instance, here on the beak underneath, I was shading a little bit. I've just done some little cross hatching. You can do cross hatching, which would be little X strokes. You can do little slanted strokes. Here in the eye, I've just kind of just filled in with a lot of little short crisscrossing strokes to make that eye black. For instance, if we wanted to darken some of his feathers here, we could just do some little straight strokes to create some darkness there. I don't want to totally cover the paper, but when we start putting some color over this will help us get a little bit of shading. His body back here among the leaves is a little darker. It's in shadow back there, so we'll darken some of this negative space in here with just some cross hatching. So we can just continue on and do as much of the little detail darkening or, you know, any other texture that you want to do. Some of it we can add with paint when we start painting in the design, and some of it we can do with just some additional pen and ink work. So for instance, this little leaf back here, if you look in the photograph, it's darker on this front edge. So I can go in and just add some little line work. And you want to try to do the line work in the following the contour. So I'm going to just do it sort of like the contour that the little vein lines would work. So we've got that darkened. This one here is a little darker. So we can go back on that other, this one here, and just put in some vein lines, but make them just a little heavier so that you're not losing them completely. So let's do that on this front of this leaf before we get started with the shading on that. And you could use a heavier pen if you want to, but you know, for the sake of this, to get by with just one pen, we're using the 0.05. I'll just go over those lines a couple times just to widen them and make them a little heavier. And then I'm just going to go back and I'm just doing little straight lines filling in that space between the veins on the front edge of that leaf that is folded up. So folding the leaf in half. We'll do a little more cross hatching here on the bird to separate that. This little leaf here again is darker to the front. So I'm going to darken the vein lines and then come in here and just fill that in with some little fine strokes the length of the, or the width of the leaf. So I'll just keep working some of these leaves as we go along. Working on this one here behind, that's sitting behind these leaves. So again, I'm darkening the vein lines first. Then I'm just gonna fill in that leaf with some straight lines. I'm back working on the Cardinal's body, just darkening that a little bit more with some cross hatching. A little bit more texture on these little branches that are branching off from the center, the main trunk of the tree. They're all kind of gnarled and twisting along. These little weeping trees have a lot of branches that go in different directions. And I'm not going to sit here and do all the inking, you know, on the video. I'm going to stop the tape and finish up, and I'll do a scan so that you can see where I'm at when I get more of this done. You can use that as a guide. I just want to give you kind of a little, just a little preview of what we're doing, so you can work on this on your own. Again, darkening the veins and the section of leaf that we're going to shade, and then just filling in with some little straight fine strokes. Now on this leaf, that's an open leaf, and we just want to darken here along the vein to add a little shading. I'm just scribbling little strokes, sort of like, think of it as if you were shading with paint. So I'm just trying to create little short strokes along the vein line and then soften them as they come out so they're not as heavy, to blend them out into the white. Do a little bit on this side. We'll do a little bit of that on this little leaf. Again, I'm darkening close to the center vein line, and then just fading those lines as I come out, making them sketchier and more open. So we're adding as much shading as we can with the pen strokes so that when we go to put on the paint, we won't have to do so much variation in the paint color. The pen strokes shine, coming through the paint will add a lot of your shading. Here I'm working on a branch, the bottom of the branch, and I'm going to shade down here underneath. Our light's coming somewhere from the kind of up and back. These are almost a little backlit. So I'm keeping those little pen strokes real close together down here on the bottom edge of the branch. Again, curving them a little bit to follow the contour to give that branch a rounded look. So now on this branch, again, I said the light's coming sort of from the top. It's, I guess, from the top left more than the top right. So you can see on this branch, we're shaded here on the right edge. So we can go into this branch and just create a little more shading on this side. And again, I'm just a scribble line, kind of up and down, and some of the parts I extend a little longer just to give a little more texture. We don't want a straight, even line of shading along there, and they're curved just a little bit so that, again, it gives that branch a rounded appearance. So some little short strokes, throw a long one, maybe half to 3/4 of the width of the branch every once in a while, just for some variation. So you want those actually going across. Don't get them too angled, which I started to do at first. So I'm coming back and straightening those out a little bit. And these little sections here where we have a branch, a horizontal branch coming into this vertical one, I'm just kind of fanning those strokes out so that we go in both directions. So it gives it a connection. So we'll come back up here and continue working on this branch, or this trunk, I guess it is. Let me see this little one here. We can darken this bottom edge of it a little more, where it comes into this branch. Okay, so I hope you get the idea of where we're going with this. So I'm going to stop the tape and I'm going to go ahead and finish my inking, and then we'll come back and start doing some color. Once you have your inking done to the point that you want it, I want you to apply a coat of like a matte sealer Krylon Matte or Deco Art Americana has a matte spray. I'm trying to think, there's several other brands out there, but you know, whatever you have available will work. But we just want to be sure you erase your pencil lines first. But you know, after you've got your inking done, erase the pencil lines, spray with matte spray, and then we'll come back and start adding some color. Here's my final ink design, and I've made a scan of this, and that'll be in your packet so you can see exactly where I finished at, so you can get yours close to this, or you know, if you want to add any more detail or less detail, that's fine. We are going to start doing some color. I've erased my pencil lines and I've sprayed the sheet of paper with a couple light coats of matte spray. And now we're going to work in some color. And when you're working on pen and ink, you want your colors to be very transparent because you don't want to cover up your ink lines. You want them to show through your paint. So it's best to start with some type of medium to give your paint more transparency. So what I'm using is Deco Art Traditions Faux Finish Medium, Faux Finishing Medium. And this is just looks white coming out of the bottle, but it dries clear, and it has a little bit of an extender in it so that it'll help, you know, your drying time. It'll make your paints dry a little slower so you can work a little longer. So we're going to start out with the bird, and we're not going to use a lot of color. You know, I usually work with a very limited palette, so I'm going to start on his head, and I'm just going to brush a light coat of this Faux Finishing Medium over the area that I'm going to apply the paint. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of bright red. This is Naphthol red in the Traditions line, but you know, feel free to use, you know, any of the Americana colors. You just need some bright red. And I'm going to just work that over the head of this Cardinal. I'm starting out along the edges, and I'm going to let that soften as we come in. And you can see, we can still see our ink lines through that. And this medium helps me to be able to go back over the paint a little bit and keep blending it out. It doesn't dry as soon as it hits the paper. So we're going to come in here a little bit more. Up here around the top of the head over the eye. And if you look at our original picture, there's a lot of yellows in this Cardinal. So I'm going to also pick up a little bit of yellow oxide. And that's just kind of if you were looking at an Americana color, maybe like mustard seed. And I'm going to work that in here over the red also, just to give that a little bit of a yellow glow to his feathers. And we'll come back and darken, do a little bit of shading. But we're just getting an overall color right now. So we're going to come down here to the lower part of his body. And I'm just using my dirty brush. I'm going to stay off the leaves and come here in between. And it doesn't matter whether we do the red or yellow first. Let's go with the yellow this time. And you can see here on the back of his body, there's a lot of yellow in that red. So let's add some yellow back in here. play out a little bit. And then we'll pick up some more red and start working that here under his neck. And soften that back into this yellow a little bit. And I've got the faux finish medium in my brush, and I'm working that into the paint on my palette also. So in these small areas, we don't necessarily have to put the medium down first. We can just come in and brush some of that color in. And you can see in these areas where we have heavier inking, the cross-hatching and stuff, that already helps shade that color. So we're going to come down here on his lower body. And again, I'm trying to stay out of my leaves. We're going to a little bit of more yellow back in there. And actually on the picture, the lower part of his body isn't real bright red. It's got a lot of the umbers and things in it. But for right now, I'm just going to get an overall reddish color in there, and then we'll come back and we can darken that later. In here and add a little brighter red down here towards the bottom. And soften that back up into the golden yellow colors. Should be a little bit of red back here in between these leaves. where his feathers are showing through. A little bit here in the middle there. So that gives us a start on our bird. So next we will work on we'll do the tree trunks next. And we're going to use some grays and umbers on those. So I'm going to use a medium gray and some raw umber. And here's our medium gray value. Again, my paint tacks up a lot into these lights, so I'm going to add a little bit of water to this. You don't want to put too much water in it because it'll cause your paper maybe to buckle. But with the matte spray that we put over it, you can add a little bit. I'm picking up just a little bit of raw umber to work in on the other side of this tree trunk, just to warm that up a little bit. So you can see just a tiny little bit. I'm going to switch to a smaller brush here, and I'm not going to finish the tree trunk right now. I just want to do a couple of leaves so you can see how we're working on leaves. And I'm going to use phthalo green yellow actually, and mix a little bit of raw sienna into it. It'll tone it down just a little bit. And let's use that color back here for the brighter edges of the leaves. You could also use a little bit of the yellow oxide that we used on the bird mixed in with the green. I want the back leaves, the back side of the leaves where the light's hitting, to be more of a yellow-green. You can vary these, make some of them a lighter green by making them actually more transparent. Add a little bit more of your faux finish medium and they'll become a lighter, more transparent green. Or if you use a little less medium, they'll be a little darker. You can see here I'm just adding, some of these I'm adding a little bit more of the yellow oxide, which will make it even more yellow. And then others you can add more of the green, which will give it a more of a blue-green color. But you want some variation. You don't want all these to look exactly alike. And it helps, like here where you have one overlapping the other, to make sure that the edges that meet are different shades of green, and that'll help separate those so they don't look like they're running together so much. Some of these down at the bottom, you can even mix up your brighter green and add a little bit of the red to it. Since red's the complement of green, it'll tone that green down. So some of these here where you want them away from the center of interest, you don't want them to be so bright. We can make a real toned down green. I'll work some of this color here along these front lower petals or lower leaves. Again, you can vary those with a little bit more yellow. We're starting into the 4th of July weekend and you may hear fireworks in the background. And using the raw sienna versus the yellow oxide will change your green mix a little bit also. Since the raw sienna is just a little darker and duller than the yellow oxide is, it'll give you some more variation. I think we have a start on all of our leaves now. Let's go back and finish painting in our tree trunks. Again, we were using some of the medium gray and a little bit of a brown. We can use, and you can use any of the umbers. You can use, or siennas, the raw umber, or you could use some raw sienna. Seems like when you start putting the color on, you really start seeing the different parts of the design, where everything before was sort of running together with all that inking. You can start seeing spots where maybe we need to, add some more shading, or maybe a little bit more line work. Some areas that are, is this a leaf or is it part of the bird? You can make those decisions as you go along. I think we'll make this part of the bird. These little negative spaces in there. So a little section here that really should have some more inking to connect this little tree trunk. Some little tree trunk in here that we didn't put any inking on, but we can add some inking after we're done.